first assignment that you will be doing at the Academy of Real Estate in Boston is something we call first marks. You will be using bargue drawings for these first marks assignments, but the bargue drawing is a great way to introduce you to the way we simplify things and the way that we approach things in stages. So first marks is really the first 10 to 15 lines that we're putting down to describe any given object. So our goal is to really work from casts and work from real life, but those are kind of big and complex things, and they're also in 3 dimensions. So we work from the bargue drawings because they offer us a way to solidify the fundamentals of mark making, simplifying, process, value, drawing, all the basics. They really allow us to focus on those things without the complexities of 3 dimensions and more complex real life situations. So they're really a way for us to put on some training wheels and prepare ourselves to work from life and work from 3 dimensions by working from 2-dimensional bargue drawings. So first marks is a rehearsal of not only setting up our paper and getting everything ready, but also for us to rehearse mark making and also simplifying. So here are some examples of what I would call first marks. As you can see, they are simplified, straight liney versions of the thing that we are trying to draw. So we are never going right in for details. We're really trying to think of the large proportions. Think of if you're trying to draw a circle, if you were to make a stop sign first, and then articulate and break down and then make the curve what it is. It really allows us to get the individual personalities of shapes much better if we focus on large shapes first. Large shapes, big proportions, major landmarks. So your goal for first marks is a few lines to get you started, to make sure that your foundation is strong and that you're heading in the right direction. So oftentimes in first marks, we're starting with the largest proportions. That might be the top and the bottom and the left and the right, or a major division. What I want you to do is, in a way, be lazy. I want you to find the simplest, easiest stuff to find. And how are we gonna find those marks? Where do we know where to put them? We're gonna be using a couple tools. We're using our skewers. So you could use a knitting needle, or this is a wooden skewer that you can get at like a grocery store. And then we're also gonna be using our plumb. So a plumb is just a heavy object at the bottom of a string. So this is just like a random weight, but you could use a binder clip or anything. And then I need to make sure I have plenty of sharp pencils and eraser. The gummy erasers. I prefer the gummy eraser for the bargue drawing. But yeah. What also is kind of nice is these they're kind of like clicky pencils, but they're erasers. These are also really nice. Okay, so I'm gonna get a zoom in more. The first way that we're going to approach this is first marks, kind of the typical way. And I'm gonna show you 2 ways. One is a little bit more advanced and a little bit more of a challenge. If you feel overwhelmed, just stick with the super basic thing I'm gonna show you first. None of this is easy. So it may sound easy and look easy, but it's not. This is actually quite difficult. We take in a lot of visual information and we're asking you to simplify it. So you can always go back and take a look at references of what good first marks look like. They are easy, simple, and they're a way for us to make sure that we're headed in the right direction. And I'll also go over different ways that we can check ourselves once we do have marks down on our paper. Like I said, this is going to be the super basic way of starting our first marks. And we are going to do 3 to 4 variations of these. So we'll do first marks for this bargue and up to a certain point. And then what we're gonna ask you to do is start all over again, put new paper down, get a totally different level 1 bargue drawing, and get a plumb line, and then do first marks. And then again, get it to a point, make sure with each of those first marks that you do have down, that you do get them approved by an instructor. Because once those first marks are down, we're going to make sure we're stopping and we are going to double check if we can improve our first marks in any way. So it's getting the first marks down and then assessing them. That is huge, that's key. So you wanna make sure that the bargue drawing is passed, and then you can start a new first marks drawing. Okay, so how do we start making marks on here? So the first thing I wanna go over is what types of marks do we want? So we really wanna make sure that we're having our sharp pencils, and I want you to be focusing on what we call ghosty bandy lines. So they're relatively straight lines. That is a ghosty bandy line. So you notice that I rehearsed what I was doing first, and I kind of came in for a landing and then made a mark and confirmed it. So I'm not going in and saying this is my line. So this line has a lot going on, and it's much more difficult to do. And this is much more committed. These lines are very, very, very easily erasable. So really what we're doing with our first marks is we don't want to commit to anything. We want to be afraid of commitment at the beginning. So we're just making, these are kind of our sketches. These are our first marks. These are just our theories that we're going to be basing some things on. So how do we find what those first marks are? Again, where I'm going to be using mostly ghosty bandy lines. We call these our straight lines, even though they do have a slight, the arc of my wrist, the curvature, but those are still straight lines to us. So we're not going to be going in and trying to get every little thing right away. What I want to be doing is thinking, how can I simplify this? Okay. If you're not sure how you want to simplify this, I do recommend taking a piece of tracing paper over it and then rehearsing and saying, well, how could I possibly simplify this? So to me, if you think about how would I break this down in a straight line way, ignoring all the junk and getting it down simple, we could even look at the face as one movement and then two movements. We could think of this as a higher end of the proportion to the lower end of the proportion. So I want to just make sure I'm having kind of a block. Also, people call this the block it. Okay, so how do we do this? So there's one way that we can get something to start from. And so the first thing I'm going to do is go for maybe the total bottom. And so how am I going to do that? I'm going to use my plum, and I'm actually going to go straight across. And if you can notice, I can look over to my drawing, which I don't have a drawing yet, I just have a plumb line, and I can see where it is on my drawing. Now, as soon as I go to grab my pencil, oh no, where is that now? I'm in the middle of nowhere, I don't have any landmarks to judge by, so I just have to put something down. So I'm going to make a mark where I think I had it. So I'm not committing, I'm just making a mark, first mark. And so now this could be, I could be wrong. I could be like holding this weird. And that's why we don't trust our tools. We will always double check ourselves in multiple ways. So I'm going to try to hold my arms level, and I'm going to come over here and say, whoa, I was way off. But now I can see how off I was. Okay, so now that gives me a good gauge of like, no, it's up here. All right, so I made the new mark, and now I'm going to erase the old one. Okay, so I can check my new mark and say, all right, that feels pretty good. So I can commit a little bit more to that. I'm going to be a little bit more generous. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing for the very top. So notice how I'm doing the very bottom and the very top. So I want to be able to check that measurement. I'm going to do the same thing here. And again, I'm in the middle of nowhere. I don't really have a lot to land on with my eyes. So as soon as I drop this, I'm going to, I think it was about here. Now, notice I'm making these marks on my plum. That's just very convenient for me. I know it's way out here, but once I get that down, I'll extend it. So again, I'll do this all the way up, and I think that actually can be a little bit lower. So then I'm going to extend that a bit further because I can see that my peak is actually out further. Now, notice that when I was drawing this line, I wasn't perfect with it. I'm gonna come back in, clean that up. I need a singular, clear statement. That's extremely important. A singular, clear statement allows us to assess. If I had a line that looks like this, that's not a singular, clear statement. You can't even see that. Here, I'll put it down here. This is not a singular, clear statement. That has a bunch of stuff going on. This, we want more of something like this. Ghosty bandy lines. That, I can measure against that. I can look at a shape that is bounded by this and say, yes, it is, no, it's not. This is too ambiguous for us to determine if it's right or wrong. So that is why clear statements are extremely important. Okay, so now I have 2 marks on my board, right? So I measured, I used a tool here to measure that. I used a tool to measure that. That was looking really nice. But now because I have 2 things on my paper, I have the ability to check them in a third way. All right, so right now, alignment, okay? Now I can check a measurement. So if I take the total height to the total bottom, I'm using my skewer, I'm placing the tip at about where I see the top of this, and then I'm taking my thumb and I'm marking it with my nail. So you see how the top is right here. And I'm marking the bottom with my nail, and now I have this measurement. So let's see if you can see. So I'm marking it with my nail like this. Let's see if you can see. So I'm marking it with my nail, and then the top went to the top over here. So this measurement should also work. So if this was right and this was right, and I measure between the 2 of them, it should measure out. And as you might be able to see, it measures perfectly. So I have confirmed these lines. So I can feel really good about them. I can actually take this and say, you know what, this is gonna be my non-negotiable. I'm still gonna wait a little bit because I'd rather have a non-negotiable kind of right in the middle of this. Okay, so now I have a full height for my object. Everything pulls across, everything should line up, everything should measure. This is the beauty of sight-size drawing. Okay, so now we have, we have to get some more things down. What do we put down next? So I'm going to create maybe a this side so that I can make sure I can look at this abstract shape. So left to right measurement is a little bit different. So we're up and down measurement is a little bit easier because it looks the same no matter what. Okay, but if I do left to right measurement, if I take a measurement like this and I move it too far out of my peripheral, I start to see a different angle of my thumb and the measurement actually changes. So if you're taking left to right measurements on the bargue drawings, it's very important that you take a measurement and then shift your whole body, okay? So I'm doing this and then I need to shift, because what happens is if I do this, I'm seeing a totally different view of my thumb and it's not the same measurement, okay? So what I'm gonna do is take the tip of the skewer or needle and I'm gonna put it directly against the plum. I'm marking the needle with my thumbnail where the drawing is. So now I need to shift and do the same thing over here. Now this would have been smart for me to do with my left hand because I'm right-handed. So here I'm actually marking with the tip here, my finger here, and I'm shifting over and I'm gonna make a mark for that measurement, okay? So I made a mark. Now, before I commit to that mark, what I wanna do is stand back and look at the shape. Look at that space. Does it look right? If it does not look right, then don't continue with it. If it looks too big or too small, don't continue. What you can also do is recheck that measurement, reconfirm it. And if it measures out correctly and if it looks okay, then we can commit to it. Okay, so now I'm gonna grow that space. I'm gonna grow that line. Okay, clean it up where I need to. Okay, so then we can also do the same thing over here with our forehead. Okay, so I'm going to, again, with my left hand, I'm right-handed, so it's easier to draw with this. And I'm going to come over here, go to my plumb line, mark the side there, shift over, mark, stand back and look. Does it look right? Now, not only does the plumb to here have to look right, but this whole width needs to look right. Okay, so yes, we can measure this, see if it's right, look at it, see if it's right, but guess what? Now we have another measurement that we can check ourselves with. A lot of this is learning how to check ourselves and learning how to correct ourselves. Okay, so visually, I think it looks okay. Measurement wise, I'm going to take a full measurement and see how that looks. All right, so that's, to me, actually measuring out a little too big. So if that measures a little too big, which it does, I'm seeing a little bit of space here, I'm not going to proceed. I'm going to say, all right, something's up. I'm going to double check some of my measurements. So I'm going to do this, recheck this one, and then recheck this one. And this one I think actually can be out just a little bit further. So notice I'm just moving it just like a slight bit. And then I'm going to double check the larger measurement again. And then that's working better. So now I'm going to proceed. So notice that I'm making a mark, checking it, double checking it, then proceed. If it doesn't work, do not move forward. This is a time for you to correct it. If I just assumed it was right and went forward, I could have, easily created a domino effect for issues. So here I'm going to extend that a little bit further, just to give myself some space there. So it's, not quite, it doesn't quite look like the thing, but you can see that we're kind of building a block of clay here. Now the simplification for this, now before I had even said, oh, we could do this, which is true. So maybe I'll do that one. I'll do kind of that simplification. So here we've got this area, but this is maybe a little mark for us to just take note of. Some things that I really like to take note of is where things cross the plumb line. So here, this is a really great spot because it's a really easy nook and cranny to place. And so here's, we have a spot here. It's in relationship to this and to this. So there's two ways we can approach putting this location down. Now I'm just going to be marking where it crosses the plumb. And so one thing I could do is just kind of eyeball. I could say, well, here's the bottom, and I know this needs to be, 3 inches up or so. And I could just say, I think it's about there. I didn't measure anything, but I'm going to stand back and look at it, and I think it actually looks a little too low. And so visually, I have two ways of checking this. I can pull across. I can now check my guess with the pull across, and it was too low. And I can double check the measurement here by measuring it off the very bottom and then measuring it off of here. And both of those things say that I was too low. So now I can shift it up, recalibrate, and that helps my brain to recalibrate what I'm doing. Okay, so those guesses they're wrong, but that's okay. It's not about being right from the start. It's being able to put something down, assess it, and correct it. So I visually looked at it, it seemed too low. I double checked it with measurements, they were too low. And so then that forced me to bring it up and make it higher. Okay, so now that I have this mark here, this is the chin section, I'm gonna say, you know what, that's gonna be my non-negotiable. I wanna make sure that this is the thing that I measure all the other things against. So I will actually continue that all the way through. And I'm gonna also make note that this is my non-negotiable. This is not gonna move. You have to choose your one non-negotiable and then choose a second non-negotiable. This one is nice because it's at least in the middle of something. So maybe this is my non-negotiable that I'm never gonna move. So if I end up having issues with anything, I just don't move that. That is extremely important. So you should always have a vertical non-negotiable and a horizontal non-negotiable. Okay, so going from here, I have this chin that I'd like to simplify. And so I'm just gonna go 1 and then 2. Okay, so that's 1 and then 2. Okay, so, that seems difficult. How do we do that? Well, the simplification of this single line, we know has to come out of this anchor point here. So again, I'm just going to guess. You know, if I think about the straight line here, what angle is this? Does it point to 9:30, 10 o'clock on the clock? What angle is that? I can take a ghosty bandy line and guess. So notice I'm going past the point. This is important too. We call those the tails. So if I have a connection point, I want them to go past them, because if I have to change this line, at least I still know where this is. So go past the connection point and make sure you have these kind of flow throughs for the line. So now I can step back and take a look at this angle, and I can flick my eyes back and forth and determine if I like the angle. And to me, the angle actually right now looks a little too steep. So I'm going to make it a little bit smaller of an angle, and then erase the old one. Notice I'm making clean, clear, singular marks. Again, very important for us to visually judge. When we get up to working from casts is much more difficult and our tools are much more unreliable. So we do not want to trust our tools all the time. We have to really start to rely on our eyeballs, okay? So here we have an angle that I feel like is a lot more in line with what I'm seeing, okay? And I'm gonna go, I will also have a separate video that's specifically focused on different ways to check yourself once you have a bunch of marks down. But the things we've covered so far are the alignments have to work, the angles have to work, the measurements have to work, and they have to work not only with the plums but together. So not only do they have to align, but the measurements have to work together. So even with just the 6 lines I have down here, I have multiple ways of checking myself. So again, this is first marks. So ideally I would get maybe 6 or 7 more lines down here so I could make sure I'm heading in the right direction. And again, look back to the examples of what good first marks looks like. This is the method of getting first marks. And some of the things we've done were eyeballing and then double checking using our measurements. So again, we're using alignments to take note of things. You know, if we're saying, okay, here's the peak of the nose, I want the peak of the nose to be around this height. Maybe a little lower. I'm trying to speed this up a little bit to get a little bit more down. And then the width of it should be about here. So here we have kind of a junction point. Okay, so now I have this line, and then I need a line that goes from the nose to the chin. So again, I can come in and do a ghosty bandy line. I'm going through the lines, right? This is my first guess. Stand back, and that is not right. So what's happening here is I'm cutting, like you can see how I've made this chin way too short. So that's not right. So what I do is I need to just pivot this line through that point. So maybe I just made it too angled. Okay, so now I'm going to erase the old one, make sure I have that singular clear line. And then I'm going to take a look at it. Do I feel like this shape works with this? And if I feel like it's a good starting point, I'm going to move forward and then do more. So other important things to be marking for first marks: having a singular line for where it goes through the plum here. If we take the major diagonal of the hairline would be a good mark, okay? Maybe marking where the bottom of the ear shadow is. So, and then, you know, obviously 1, 2, 3 would be fine for this. That would be enough for first marks. If we kind of have a basic envelope and a major division here or there, that would be good. Again, taking tracing paper over your bargue and testing out some simplifications would be good. But these are the goals: focusing on mark making, keeping a sharp pencil, simplifying, checking yourself when you put new lines down, okay? So we're abstracting it to a very high degree. We're trying to get large proportions and major measurements down. So at any given time, you can stop and say, well, I want to double check this measurement. If this measurement works, then this measurement should work. So double check yourself with the measurements, with alignments, with angles. And again, you can reference the other video where we talk about ways to check yourself using visuals. Okay, so that is first marks. You're going to be doing them on junky paper, and you're going to be doing 3 to 4 of them. And make sure that once you have first marks down, you double check the crap out of yourself. You just want to make sure that you can't be any more correct with that simplification than possible. It'll make everything else afterwards go much, much, much faster. Okay, and always make sure to have an instructor check it. This could be by email if you're doing this at home, or in person in class. So that's, you know, typically how we have people start. However, if you're looking for maybe a more challenging way to do it or a slightly more advanced way to approach it, you could try introducing actual site-size drawing. So this is a way that you're going to be doing cast drawing and painting, and it's also a great way to do portraits and any type of work. So I wanted to show you that if you did want to try full site size just to get a little bit more comfortable with it before you head to cast, this is the way that you would do it. So normally we had, you probably saw in the previous video that I had people taking alignments directly off of it. So we're going to be using the same tools, the plumb, the skewer, and our pencil and our eraser. However, we're going to be making sure we're taking a few steps back. So this is, you know, about, I guess, 4 feet back. You could even do 5 or 6 feet back. But we're taking all the same measurements, but they're going to be a lot more inaccurate. But that's okay, because we're training our eyes to be our main tool. Our eyeballs are our main tool. These tools are actually quite inaccurate. So if you felt like you were kind of inaccurate up here, when you're coming back here and taking measurements from back here, you're much more inaccurate. Okay, so if you want to try to do some first marks using site size, it's a great exercise and a great challenge to really start training your eyes to be the main tool. Okay, so not only are we doing alignments, but we are closing one of our eyes. So the reason that we actually see 3 dimensions is because we see 2 different versions of the same thing that our brain fuses into 3 dimensions. So we do need to close one of our eyes when we're doing site size, when we're measuring, because we need to make sure we're seeing one view of the thing that we're drawing. This is still a flat object, but it still gets us used to how we are going to be drawing and painting upstairs in the cast room. So, you know, we try to make sure we're at the same place every time. We're holding things up with our arms completely extended, no bending, full extended, good posture, closing one eye. And so again, I can pull across and make sure the top aligns with that, pull across, make sure the bottom aligns with that. If I want to make a whole new one, I do the same thing, or maybe I'm going to mark the bottom of the ear. So I kind of saw where that was on my paper. I'm going to come up and I'm going to make a mark. This is literally in the middle of nowhere. But now I stand back again and I can double check. And that looks a little high. So then I'm going to make my new mark. Erase my old one. Okay, and I can always come back and double check again, and yes, that looks good. Another way to check ourselves is to make sure our nose needs to be higher than our ear, and it is, our nose is higher than our ear. With measuring, now I'm going to measure from the bottom of the ear to the top of the bargue there, and I'd already put this in from previously, but when I'm standing back, again, holding my knitting needle, fully extended. I don't want to be like slouching and doing whatever. You want to make sure you're standing really strong, feet, I'd say shoulder width apart, just a really nice, strong, confident stance. And we're going to extend our arm fully and place the tip of the needle at the very top of that line, and then mark my thumbnail right where my mark for the ear is and flip it over. And now what's difficult is my arm is kind of doing this. And also, I can't focus on this and that at the same time because of depth perception. So these are the challenges you're going to face in cast drawing, but this is really a great time for you to be able to say, okay, I'm checking it, yeah, that works. Now does it really check out? So this is a way for you to say, you can back yourself up with definitive, more accurate measurements, but this is a way for you to try out and get used to being inaccurate with your measurements and using your eye as a main tool. So again, we're going to stand back here and we're going to measure the full height of the bargue drawing to the bottom of the ear. And then I should flick over here, and the measurement does work out. Again, it's going to be hard to tell because your arm is moving a little bit and you can't focus on the two things at the same time, but that's okay. Eyeballs, it should work out, the measurements, it should work out. And then, so my challenge to you is try to do a first marks for a bargue drawing, completely sight size. Just get the first marks down there. And once those first marks are down there, then go up and measure off of the actual bargue and see how far off you were with some of these measurements. Okay, so that's going to help you to recalibrate your brain to train your eyes to see a little bit better. So, and then try that again. Do an entire first marks, grab a different bargue, do another set of first marks, completely sight size, don't cheat, don't come up here and measure. Once you have a full first marks or construct down, then go up and measure it and double check. This is a great way for you to start practicing getting used to measuring from a distance. So that's an extra challenge, and